transmission. Good morning.
Morning.
My name's Liz. I am currently completing my training to become a clinical hypnotherapist, which is why I'm here today. I practice something called solution-focused hypnotherapy, which means that we focus on helping people create coping mechanisms moving forwards. We don't ask people to talk about traumatic events that have happened to them in the past or relive old nasties. We talk about making you happy moving forward. And the reason I want to talk to you guys about it is because we take a very, very scientific approach to this material. This is based entirely on neuroscience. A lot of the time you say hypnotherapy to people and they go, oh, a bit woo-woo, because my eyes not around my eyes. And that's great. If I could, honest to God, magic you all into being happy, I would. That would be brilliant. But I can't. What I can do is tell you how the science works, because it is literally possible to think yourself happy. You go to a gym and you can build up your muscles, or you can shrink bits of your body. You can do exactly the same thing with your brain. So, let's understand first of all how the brain works and how things like anxiety, depression, OCD and all these things are created, and how we can suffer in the way we do and what we can do about it. So, first of all, this is your brain. You may or may not realise that this is not to scale. However, the most important part of your brain, and the bit that we really want to focus in on, is the left prefrontal cortex. You do not have to take notes. I am not quizzing you later. You don't have to remember any of this. But just remember that this bit is the bit that we think of as you. It's the conscious part of you. It's the part that's responsible for our interactions. It's the part that's responsible for sonnets, for paintings, for architecture, for all the wonderful things in the world. At the moment, this is attached to a vast intellectual resource that we call the intellectual mind. When you operate from this part of the brain, you generally get things right in life. It is a positive force. It makes a rational assessment based on what's going on around you, and it allows you to be happy. However, there is another part of the brain, and we call it the primitive mind. You may have heard of it referred to as the limbic system. The centre and influential part of the primitive mind is the amygdala. The amygdala is what we sometimes refer to as the fight, flight, or freeze area of the brain. It is attached to two other very primitive parts of the brain. The hippocampus, which is where we store all our emotional and often inappropriate behaviours, so things like phobias and compulsions get stored here. And the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is responsible for physical, chemical responses. Let's say, for example, that you leave this building today and you run into a polar bear. What would happen? Your anxiety would go up. You would start sweating. Your heart rate would increase. Your stomach might gurgle. You would be off like a shot. Under the circumstances, this would be a very, very good thing for you. You'd be extremely pleased that you have this reaction. The problem that we have is that anxiety happens all the time to us. Now, anxiety can be a very gradual process. It can build up very, very slowly. It can be things like a bill arriving, an exam that you've got to take, a meeting that you've got to have. And if the brain senses for any reason at all that we are in danger, we lose intellectual control to a greater or lesser extent. And we go down into this primitive part of the brain. So if you think about it from an evolutionary viewpoint, it's a very, very sensible system. The caveman looked out of his cave and there was snow and ice and danger all around and he couldn't go out to hunt. So he crawled back into his cave and he pulled the rug over his head and he stayed there until things got better. And we've basically equated these symptoms to the symptoms of depression. When you are depressed, you don't want to go anywhere, you don't want to see anybody, you want to pull the rug over your head and stay there till it's all. If we were out on the plains or in the jungle as cavemen, we would never ever be far from the emergency panic button. We would constantly be in a state of low-level anxiety. Again, great for the caveman, not so good for us. Anger, similarly, that fight response, is a protective opt-out clause. So if another tribesman came towards you as a caveman, you'd hit him. Because it's protecting you. The brain is protecting you. And that is an absolutely brilliant thing for the most part. However, this primitive mind is a negative mind. It can only be negative. If you think about it, it has to in order to protect you. It is a vigilant mind. So if you knew that there was a polar bear out there, you would constantly be checking the windows. It is an obsessional mind. You would not be able to stop thinking about that polar bear. Unfortunately, it is not an intellect, which means it cannot innovate. It has the developmental age of a toddler. It cannot come up with new ideas. So if something that's happened in the past worked, if it helped you survive, this brain will do it again. This is where we get things like panic attacks come in. Something bad happened to you and you had a panic attack, but you didn't die. Aha, says the primitive mind, that worked. Let's do it again every time something scary happens. And you get trapped in a vicious cycle. We do create our own negativity. And this is the problem with us. We create our own negativity by negatively forecasting the future. And it can be really big things. It can be, I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to get a good job. I'm never going to meet the perfect mate. I'm never going to this, I'm never going to that. It can be big things, life-changing things. But it can also be little things. So you've got a meeting coming up. You've been to these meetings before, and you know intellectually that it's probably going to go all right, because they usually do. But you think about it, and you think about everything that could go wrong, and you think about it 50 times. And then you go to the meeting, and it's fine. Because you knew it would be, it's absolutely fine. But in your brain, you've been to 51 meetings, and 50 of them are shit. It's at this point that we have to remember that to a certain extent the brain is not capable of understanding the difference between imagination and reality. If you imagine something bad, the physical, chemical response that you get is the same as if you actually experienced it. Which is why people can have trouble with traditional therapy. Traditional therapy can work exceptionally well. But if somebody's been through a trauma and they're being asked to relive it over and over again, you can actually create those same feelings of fear, of anxiety as you would if you're actually going through it. So we can negatively forecast the future. We can also negatively introspect about the past in the same way. That's what we do when we remember bad things. We do have, you will be very pleased to hear, a natural way of dealing with this anxiety. So we use the analogy of a stress bucket. We all have a bucket in our brains, and every time we get stressed, in it goes. If something very bad happens to you, a bereavement, an accident, something like that, you might get a lot of stress. The bucket fills up. But we have an inbuilt way of dealing with the stress, of emptying the bucket. And it's called REM. Rapid eye movement when we sleep. That part of the sleep when we are completely paralysed, we're completely in our dreams, in our mental state, just the eyes open. REM sleep takes emotional memories and turns them into narrative memories. So it effectively moves them from here to there, to memories we can cope with. And you're all familiar with the process, even if you don't realise it. So for example, you go to work or you go to a class or you go out for the evening and somebody annoys you, like really gets on your toes. And you go home and you talk to your significant other and you say, this has happened and I'm really annoyed and I'm really frustrated, and your significant other or your housemate or whoever it is says, don't worry about it, it'll be okay, it's not that big a deal. And you say, it is. And you go to bed and you are still thinking about it. You wake up in the morning and you feel better. You all experienced that? And you might still be thinking about it and you might still be a bit pissed off. But actually what you're really thinking is, why did I let that upset me so much? Why did I feel so bad about that? It's nothing, I'll get over it. And it's because that emotional memory of the event of that person annoying you has been turned into a narrative memory. So, I mean, I fondly imagine that I wake up in the morning and this bucket has been completely emptied by REM. And I wake up and I'm happy and I bounce out of bed and I leap into the day and I skip through the daisies going tra-la-la-la-la. Generally speaking, we don't. And why is that? Well, REM sleep is exhaustive. It is physically very draining. It expends a lot of energy. So, for whatever reason, when we have REM sleep, it's only ever about 20% of our total sleep time. So even if you sleep for 10 hours, you only actually get 2 hours of REM. And I use that as an example because I'm no good at maths. So if you've got all this stress right up to here in your stress bucket, and you go to sleep for 10 hours and you have 2 hours of REM, and it does that, you've still got some stress in your bucket. And the next day, you add more on, and maybe you get less sleep and it does that. And then the next day you add more. You can see how you get trapped in a vicious cycle. There is a way, however, to get over that. And you can understand, can't you, that if your stress bucket's full, and that's what's making you anxious, if you can empty the stress bucket, no more anxiety. So we understand how we can get to a better place. But what's the process we use to get there? Hypnotherapists use something called trance. Trance is nowhere near as exciting as it sounds. If you've ever driven somewhere and suddenly you're at your destination, you think, oh, how did I get here? You were in trance. If somebody was talking to you and you weren't wholly interested, say for example your wife's trying to tell you something and you've zoned out, darling, you were in trance. You're watching TV and suddenly the program's on and you don't know what happened. You were in trance. It's focused attention. That's all it is. As hypnotherapists, we use language patterns to put you into trance. But because the language patterns are positive, what we're actually doing is replicating REM while you're awake. So let me explain the physiology of it a little bit. Early man, early woman, were given very definite rewards for carrying out certain evolutionary processes. So they were given a reward when they hunted and gathered. They were given a reward when they supported their families. They were given rewards when they innovated. As human beings, we are better as part of a tribe. If you think about it, one man against one lion, we lose. A tribe against a lion, we win. So we were rewarded when we interacted with other human beings. This reward came in the form of motivation. Our caveman ancestors felt motivated to continue to do these wonderful things that made the species stronger. They felt motivated to carry on. They felt happier. They even felt better able to cope with physical pain. We understand what that reward is. It is the release of neurotransmitters in the brain. Somewhere in our evolutionary development, something's gone, this is the right thing for you to do to be happy, healthy and alive, therefore we're going to make you want to do it again and again by releasing neurotransmitters. And the one that we talk about most of all, because the one that's really the most important, is serotonin. And you've got your dopamine and your norepinephrine and everything, but let's focus on the serotonin, because that's what everyone always talks about. When we release a constant stream of serotonin, we are happy, brave, coping little souls. It's very nice feeling. And so we need to stay inside what we call positive parameters. The positive parameters allow us to keep up this flow of serotonin. Now the problem is, when we're depressed, we're down at this end, down at the depressed end, we basically don't release any neurotransmitters at all. We kind of flatline emotionally, and that's very difficult to deal with. When we are anxious, we release an overload of adrenalines, of cortisol and stress hormones, things like that. And so we get very, and it interrupts the flow of serotonin. So, we need to think like our ancestors. They took positive action. By hunting and gathering, and things of that ilk. We can take positive action by exercising, by going for a walk, by turning our music on really loud and dancing around like a fool. We can take action that forces the release of serotonin. We can interact. Like our caveman ancestors did to build the strength of the tribe. We can talk to people. That's one of the most important things you can do when you're stressed or depressed or anxious. Talk to somebody. It releases serotonin. And we can think positively, which is so very, very, very much harder than it sounds. How many times have you felt stressed, anxious, depressed, and somebody said to you, just think positive, and you've wanted to smack them? It is not that easy. We get stuck in a loop of thinking negatively. And what's literally happening in the brain is we're going, something bad's happening, poof, amygdala, something bad's happening, poof, amygdala. And the amygdala physically gets stronger. You are feeding the monster by doing that. It actually sparks more, it becomes more sensitive to stimuli. They've shown this on brain scans. It just starts with wee like this. And this left prefrontal cortex can actually literally shrink. It's fascinating. They've done brain scans on people with depression, and this is sad. And this is just way too exciting. So by producing a constant flow of serotonin, we can reverse that action. We think positively, we can literally strengthen this and shrink this. They've done brain scans of the Buddhist monk guys, you know, the ones who meditate a lot and they're well happy. And it's probably because they're wearing orange. Cheers, everyone. This part of the brain is really powerful. It's bigger, the walls are thicker, the neural connections are stronger. The amygdala is like a little shriveled walnut. It just doesn't work as well because they've trained themselves to be positive. So what can we do? We can take our action, we take our exercise, we can talk to people. Thinking positively can be trained. Have you ever heard people talk about having a gratitude diary? All this, you write down something you're grateful for each day.
Yeah, my friend has a 5-minute journal.
Yeah.
And he sent me one I did for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And you write down what you're grateful for, and you try and find his that one involved like finding 5 things.
Yeah.
So you actually purposefully have to think it through.
Yeah. So the idea of a gratitude diary rankles me a little bit. I think it's a bit, I am grateful for. It's a bit hippy-dippy, isn't it? Oh, I'm so grateful. Do you know when you're depressed, you're not grateful for bloody anything. The way we do it is we ask people every single day, write down 3 good things. Because even if you're in the worst place possible, do you know what? You might have had a really lovely cup of tea. So that's all you write down. I had a really nice cup of tea. I saw an advert that wasn't completely true. It might happen, we don't know. But you write down 3 good things, even if they're tiny. And eventually, over time, your brain starts looking for them. You know, we talk about people who are lucky and people who are unlucky. That's basically the difference between them. They look for the positives, they look for the negatives. You can literally train this. It's absolutely fascinating. I have seen it happen. So, we understand that we have to release a constant stream of serotonin. But it is harder than people say. The one thing that really upsets me actually is because I have been through this system myself long before I discovered hypnotherapy. Obviously, I've been very depressed and I've been on all the pills and I've talked to all the CBT people and I've done all that nonsense. And the one thing that upsets me is that doctors don't really tell you how antidepressants work, which is very often the reason they don't work. The majority of antidepressants are SSRIs, so they are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. What that means is we have a lifetime supply of serotonin in our brains. We release it, it goes into our brains, it makes us happy, and then it gets reabsorbed again. When we're depressed, we're not releasing it. The serotonin reuptake inhibitors stop it from being taken back into your brain too quick. Instead of it going, hooray, it goes, hooray, la 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 la, and it dances around your brain and it makes you happy. That's what the pills do, but the doctors don't tell you that. So the reason they might start working at first is that you have taken positive action simply by going to the doctor. You've spoken to someone, you've realised that you need to make a change, you've realised you need to be happier. And so you release serotonin, and the pills latch onto it, and they go, oh, brilliant. But then, you sit back and you think, well, I'm on pills now, I'll just wait for them to work. And you sit back and you wait, and you stop releasing serotonin, and the pills stop working. And it's a horrible, horrible thing. And if the doctor's just said to you, actually what you need to do is you need to go for a 5-minute walk, you need to talk to somebody for half an hour, you need to write down 3 good things. Then those pills would have something to latch onto, and they would really, really work. The reason that we get so upset in life is because this part of the brain is too easily triggered. If we can train our brains to remain in the intellectual part, the rational part, we can be happy. Not all the time. I wouldn't come to you and say this is the secret to eternal happiness, because life's a bitch and it doesn't work like that. Sometimes we get upset. Sometimes we have that primitive brain response. We can train ourselves not to stay there, and that is the important thing. You can say to yourself, I have a choice. I can choose to be happy. Any questions? Oh, I'm that good. Stop us all with the silence. Cool.
I have one question. So I was thinking about, so earlier on you mentioned about coping mechanisms, particularly in the primitive one, so being very vigilant and observant of dangers and that kind of thing. And I was thinking that another type of coping mechanism is kind of the opposite of that, when you ignore something and you think, oh, well, that seems very scary, I'm going to put that back in my mind and sort of deliberately ignore it. I'm not saying that's a good way to cope with it, but that is a coping mechanism that people have sometimes. Is that something that is more of the intellectual minds trying to put the primitive mind away, or do you know where that kind of behaviour sits?
I think it's the difference between acknowledging that there are certain things you can't control and denial. So the hairy bugger in the corner there is one of the most positive and well-balanced people I've ever met, because he has the ability to say, this shit is happening, but there's nothing I can do with it, about it, therefore it is not worth worrying about. Isn't that what, don't you wish you could do? Oh, bloody wish you could. He drives me mad with it, don't worry about it, it's not worth it. That is the intellectual brain making a rational assessment and saying, actually, I can't worry about it. When you go into full-on denial, what that is your depressed caveman saying, there's snow all around, I can't do anything, I'm hiding.
Right.
And that's bad brain. So it's finding that line.
So is your gentleman over there a stoic?
No, I think he just must have taken a lot of drugs when he was younger.
I was wondering, as an atheist, I'm not sure I should be going down this one, but you mentioned Buddhists first, so I was just wondering whether prayer has some sort of role in this. I've heard of people talk about the power of prayer,
Yeah.
even for people who haven't got faith, but I guess is prayer like a dialogue that's helping to shrink the unity way?
Yeah. Prayer is a form of trance, basically. And you kind of talk, I mean, I say to people, I could literally put you into trance by reading from the yellow pages. You know, I could put you into trance by reading from my doctoral thesis, although there's a chance you'd slip into a coma or something. But prayer works the same as trance in that you have that focused attention. And when we recreate REM while we're awake, the nice thing is that these two parts of the brain actually come together. So you're in trance, but you're allowing all the crap that's down here to work its way up. And your brain is subconsciously finding answers to problems. So you don't necessarily snap out of trance and go, Eureka, I've solved it. But your intellectual mind is working away in the background, finding solutions to your problems. So that's one way that prayer can work. Yeah.
Hang on, is not listening to my wife good for me?
I am not touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
I see the parents was being said.
I don't want to risk your wife finding out where I live. I'm not going to. Yeah, okay. Right, so that's my half an hour up. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you can all be happy the rest of the day because it looks like you've got a brilliant lineup.